Hello, and welcome back. This video is about setting up the main menu. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Thank you for helping me help others. So first, we're going to create a main menu folder. And keep everything main menu related in there. Project and file organization isn't as important in a small project, but it's always a good idea, and it's a good habit to get into. Having said that, the towers folder might be a good example of a folder that's getting a little too big. Having a few subfolders might make sense. Even just a weapons folder could help declutter it a bit. Now, if you are going to do something like that later on, you need to move around a bunch of stuff. When you move objects in Unreal, if they're being used, and most things are, sometimes it will create a redirector. A redirector is basically a file that says, I'm not here anymore, you can find me over here. You can turn on being able to see redirectors if you care about them by going in here, going to other filters, and then clicking on show redirectors. So if we do that, we can see that there's none actually here. And there's probably not any in this project because I haven't really moved anything around. If you do have redirectors, I believe you can right click on it to, I'm going to use air quotes here, fix it. And that is generally a good idea. Fixing a redirector basically is the editor going and updating all the things that are now pointing to the redirector to point to the actual object in the first place, or point to the actual object that's been moved. Now you might wonder why that's a good idea or why that's a bad idea. It's a good idea because you want all your stuff pointing to the correct object that's being used. It's a bad idea because if you are in a team and you're updating files with other people, that means that all those other people have local repositories of the project. So if you update redirectors on your end, check it in, they may not have an opportunity to check those out before they make changes, and then you can get into a big messy mess. Good source control habits can help with that, but effectively, if you're cleaning up redirectors and you're on a team, you want to make sure the entire team has checked in all their stuff. Then you can clean up the redirectors, check it in, and then everyone checks back out everything, and you should be good to go. So with that rambling done, I'm just going to turn the redirectors back off and go into our main menu folder. So there are a number of ways to organize your project and use a main menu overlaying, what you have elsewhere and blah, blah, blah. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new level. It's probably a better way to do it. Outside of a few specific cases in a tower defense game, you're probably not going to want open world. So we can ignore the first two here. That leaves basic and empty. So the difference between these two is basic has a bunch of lighting stuff, a player start, and a floor. Empty level is literally empty. There's nothing in the list over here. So that's what we're going to use. You may want to use basic in some cases where you want your menu system to have meshes. Now, again, all basic has a bunch of lighting components and the floor and the player start. You can also just do empty and add lighting components as you need for the meshes, or display them unlit. So we want an empty level. So we double click that or select it and hit create. First thing I want to do is just save it. So we're going to call this main menu level. And we're not throwing it in levels. We want everything in main menu. So we put it in here. Now, if you close and open the editor right now, you'll go back to the previous map. If you wanted this map to load when you open the editor, which I don't suggest until a few more videos, but the way you would do it is you go into project settings, under your maps and modes. The editor startup map is the one that you will see when you load the editor, and the game default map is the one players will see when they load. We can effectively ignore this until we're ready to package and test it out that way. In this one, again, probably want to wait a few videos for that one to make sense. You can manually just load it by double clicking the level file here. So with that, the first thing we're going to do is create the widget. So we're going to create a widget blueprint. We'll call this one WBP main menu. And here, as usual, we want a canvas panel because it's full screen. I'm just going to effectively have a vertical box with a bunch of buttons, but I'm going to surround that vertical box with a border. For this border, we want it centered. So Shift Control center here, and I'm just going to make this 400 by 600. And I'm going to set the brush color to about half gray. In the border here, we're just putting a vertical box. In the vertical box, we want buttons. So we'll start with a button. We'll call this a play button. We want to throw some text into it, which will say play. We like centered text. The button itself, we want to fill the vertical box, and we'll throw some padding on it. Oh, and apparently the text is not dragged onto the button. Which we can center it that way. All right. These buttons will have actions, so they need to be variables. And I'm going to set the background color on the buttons as dark gray. And then I'm just going to duplicate this or duplicate it 4 times. We have save slot button, options button, credits button, and lastly, exit button. And then we'll just update all the text. This is a simple game, so we're effectively going to use a save slot system. It'll just save after every map that's completed, maybe a few other times. So with that having been created, we can hit play and see what happens. So a few things happen here. First of all, we're on this level, so that is what's playing. It's showing the black background. However, we're seeing the coins and the heart health bar. The reason it's like this is in our project settings, we set our BP game mode. So we'll stop that in our project settings. If we search for game mode, we have a default game mode set to the game mode that we've created previously, which will create a player. And that's why we're getting that UI as it is. Our new main menu has no game mode set, so it went to the one that was set as a global default. However, to display our main menu UI, we'll want a main menu player controller or a player pawn, but since there's no concept of a player in the menu, we don't need a pawn. And to load those, we need to set a custom game mode. So first we'll create the player controller. This will simply be BP_MM for main menu player controller. And our player controller, all we're doing for now is we're first setting our input mode. We want this set to UI only. We do need to send in a player controller because it says player controller, not target with self. However, we are just sending in self. It will actually work if you don't connect that, but then you will get an error message. Next, we want to show the mouse cursor, because even though we're setting it to UI only, it's not automatically showing the mouse cursor. And with that, we want to then create a widget. And that will be our new main menu. We will promote that to a variable, which is called WBP main menu. And then add to viewport. With that set, we can create our game mode, which is a game mode base, not game mode. This is BP_MM for main menu, game mode. In our game mode, all we're really setting here is the player controller class. Class is the one we created, and we do not need a default pawn. Lastly, in our level itself, so the level is loaded, we can go into world settings and check and switch our game mode override. So with that done, when we hit play, it loads up the main menu. So let's add a little bit of functionality. All right, so we're going to create another widget. So the main menu approach I'm going with is basically kind of modal dialogues for the submenus. So for that, we'll just start with a user widget type of WBP options. In options, again, because we want this to be full screen, we're going to put in a canvas panel. We're then going to put in an image. And to not flashbang you, I'm going to drop this down very dark. And then Shift Control, expand. In here for now, we're just going to add a button. We'll put the button in the bottom left. If I don't hold Shift Control, it's just putting the anchor down there and leaving the position or changing the relative position up here. So for that though, we'll just set this to 20 and -20. We'll set it to a size of 260. And then this was what, 20? -80. 60 plus 20, negative. In here, we're just putting, or first we're calling it back button, making sure it's a variable, and adding some text. In here, we'll just put two less than signs and back. For the back button, we can just add an on-click event, and we'll get to that in a minute. Back in our player controller, we're going to add a few functions. First one we'll create is on options. So what on options does is when you click the options button, this will end up getting called. In this case, we're creating another widget. This will be the options widget. We want to save this as a variable. Now we're going to actually use this variable for multiple, or for all of the modal style widgets. So we're going to call this WBP modal. And because it's a WBP options type here, we need to change that. If I remove that and then change it. So you might wonder what the parent class of WBP options is. When you create the WBPs, the widgets, you can see what it is. If you're not sure, you can go into a widget blueprint and click on class settings, and you'll see parent class here. So we want to set that to a user widget type. And when we do that, it still pops up this. So we just change the variable type, let it do its thing. And I didn't need to disconnect that, so just reconnect it. And lastly, we're going to add that to viewport as well. So with that, I'm going to then just duplicate this. We'll call this one on select, save slot, and on credits. And I'm just going to reorder this slightly because my brain likes that. Lastly, we need to be able to go back to the main menu, so we're going to have an on main menu. And main menu is kind of doing the reverse. Basically what we're doing is we're getting our WBP modal. As always, we want to validate that. And when it's valid, we want to call remove from parent. And then we can set the WBP modal back to none effectively, and that will clean it up. You do, of course, have the option of having a variable per type, and then only creating it the one time, adding some more logic to see if it's already created, etc. It's not really worth it. In a menu system that's in the main game that's always running, maybe saving a little bit of memory and speed would be good, but so if we go back into our main menu or widget, we want to add some events for these buttons. So you can go and you can click it here. You click your on clicked as usual. You can go back to the designer, find the next button, click it again, or you can just go over here and click these. So I like the order, so we'll put a save slot. Scroll down here, on-click. We just save a little time doing it that way. Options was next, then credits, and lastly, exit. Exit is simple. It is just calling quit game. The default values are fine. If you set your quit preference to background, it moves the application to the background instead. No one likes that. Stop doing it. Talking to you, Steam. All right, for each of these actual buttons, play we'll deal with later. For save slot, we're going to get our player controller. We're going to use that to cast it. And here we're just calling on select save slot. Similarly, for these, we want 2 more. This one is calling on options. And this one is calling on credits. Now, depending on what other tutorial content you've watched, you might be like, oh no, you're casting multiple times. First of all, casts are not nearly as bad as a lot of people make them out to be. Secondly, the amount of times you click these individual buttons is so minuscule that you could save like 0.0001 seconds if you cached this and did it that way. So I'm not going to bother. So we have those 4, we're good. We want to go back to our WBP options. In here, our back button similarly is going to be, paste that in from the other one. We're getting our player controller and we're calling on main menu. So back in here, we're going to take our options. We're going to duplicate this. We got WBP select, save slot, duplicate it again, WBP credits. Right now, all of these things are going to do is show the screen and the back button. Lastly, we need to update in our player controller. In each of these functions on our save slot, we want the save slot created. Options had our options, and credits now has credits. And with that all done, we can hit run. Test exit first. Looks like it's working. We hit select save slot. Goes to our gray screen. We have our back button. And similarly for options and credits, all working good. Now, often modal dialogues are not full screen. Sometimes they just pop up, and the intent of a modal dialog or window is typically to prevent being able to click on the stuff that was underneath. So if you wanted to, for your own things, we'll use options as an example here. You can go in and set the image. You still want it full screen. Having it as visible basically means that it's hit testable. These are visible but not hit testable. So we do want it to hit testable. We can take our color and just set our alpha to 0. And when we run that and click on save slot, gray, click on options, it added the modal, but it's a screen that's effectively transparent. So back button's still working, but you can see that none of these are. Click on any of this and nothing happens. So it's still working as a modal and blocks the input underneath, but you can now see that stuff. So I'm going to reset this for our example. After I hit stop, Control Z. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel, watch these videos 2 weeks early, or just want to download the project files, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.